Hi guys, today we're going to talk you through an inspector calls question, which is a lit paper 2 question. With the first question you get on the paper, it takes approximately 45 minutes to complete, worth 30 marks, but don't forget your 4 spag marks. And remember, this is part of your 2-hour 15 lit paper 2.
Okay, so we're going to talk you through what a clear level 4 answer looks like today. So first of all, I'm going to talk about AO1. There's 3 AOs that you need to meet. AO1, first of all, is about your response clearly and consistently answering the question, so being really focused on that question. You also need to back up that clear focus by using effective, so really useful quotes or references from that text. Remember, you won't have an extract for this particular question, so you're going to have to remember quotes or just talk about parts of the play where those things happen that you want to reference.
Right guys, moving on to AO2. For AO2, it's your language and methodology, so you need to identify and unpick how the text is working, what the writer's aiming for, and terminology if possible. We always talk about this. AO2 is quite important. You must also explain the effect of these methods on the reader. How does it impact on the people reading or watching this play?
And finally, AO3, that sometimes people forget but an equally important AO to look at. So your points must be supported and driven by the knowledge of the era that it was written in, remembering that you've got kind of 2 eras to think about with Inspector Calls, both pre and post-war. You also need to add in some understanding of Priestley's intentions and messages. What was he trying to tell us as the reader?
Right, so the question we're going to focus on for this an Inspector Calls question is, how does Priestley present the theme of generational differences in an Inspector Calls? Your first task, guys, is to pause the video right now and make a mind map of all the answers to this question you can think of, all the times that you've seen generational differences throughout this play. See you in a minute.
So this is an example answer that we've written. It's not a particularly amazing one. There's some errors, but that's what we want you to kind of see where the errors are, and we want you to have a look at how you could add to this to make it a level 4 answer. So here we've got, Priestley presents a theme of generational differences in an Inspector Calls through the use of Sheila and Mrs. Burling. Sheila, by the end of the play, understands and accepts blame, whereas Mrs. Burling is unchanged. Sheila says, "You're pretending everything's just as it was before," whereas Mrs. Burling says, "Well, why shouldn't it be?" This shows that in 1912 the older generation was stubborn and always right, and the younger generation were willing to change. So, that's our paragraph. It needs to be improved. I want you to pause the video now and just have a think and jot down some ideas of how we could make this a little bit better.
See you in a minute. Right, welcome back guys. This is our improved answer. Have a little look at it. Just take a minute to digest it. I'm going to read it to you. Priestley presents the theme of generational differences in an Inspector Calls through the use of juxtaposition of Sheila and Mrs. Burling. Sheila, by the end of the play, understands and accepts blame when she accuses the family of pretending everything is just as it was before. Priestley clearly shows that she processed her actions and feels that the family's lack of doing so is both frustrating and narrow-minded. This is in stark opposition to Mrs. Burling, who responds by saying, "Well, why shouldn't we?" The use of this brazen rhetorical question shows that there has been no change in her viewpoint, therefore illustrating the clear generational divide in terms of responsibility. The effects this would have on a post-war 1945 audience would be to highlight the need for the changes that have already begun to take place in society and communicates Priestley's message of the importance of equality.
First of all, we're going to talk you through the changes that we've made to AO1. Interestingly, we haven't actually made that many. We've just highlighted the places where we've used the key words in the question just to make sure the examiner knows we're focused on it and we're not going off track. So we've used generational differences. We've got our 2 quotes here. You'll notice our quotes are a little bit more spread out this time, just to give us a chance to talk about each one in a little bit more detail than the original. We've then got clear generational divide right down the end of our paragraph. Again, just making sure we are clearly and consistently answering that question all the way through. We don't just answer it at the start and then trail off. We've also got effective quotes here. Our quotes nicely match our point and support our point. They're not totally random to what we're talking about.
Right guys, now we're going to look at AO2. AO2 is to identify and unpick how the text works, looking at terminology and methodology, but also focusing on the effects or methods that the writers use and the effect it has on the audience, on the reader. So if you look at the purple places on our new paragraph, we've used the terms juxtaposition and rhetorical question to show that we can spot subject terminology, but we can actually say where the impact is and how it's being used. We also focus, if you go down to the bottom of the paragraph, the effects on the 1945 post-war audience, remembering that there are two audiences for this play, the pre-war 1912 audience and the post-war 1945, and being able to highlight that there is a difference is a really, really strong structural point. Looking at AO3 now. AO3 is your contextual information and your author's intentions. So you need to think about how your context supports and drives your point forwards. So we've said in this that actually the changes that have taken place are necessary, and a 1945 audience would have recognised that in a opposition really to your 1912 setting. We've also said that actually Priestley's message is all about equality. Remember, Priestley was a socialist and he believed that everyone should be equal. Therefore, his intentions were to point that out and to point out how the need is for change and the change that has happened and the change that still needs to come. Thanks for watching.